Hey guys, do you know what a restrictive practice is? If you have, you've watched my previous videos. So guys, I'm going to double down on this video of what a restrictive practice is in the context of NDIS in Australia. So it's beyond a simple safety measure in a cell house or disability facility. Simple safety measures being medications locked away and administered by a trained support worker, scissors and other sharp objects locked away, electrical items and chemicals locked away. So simple everyday safety precautions that we all take, basically childproofing for adults. Then we get into restriction of environment. Restrictive practices are very controversial, and as I go through the series I'll explain why, because they are beyond simple safety measures, but they must be used in conjunction with a positive behaviour support plan. So a positive behaviour support plan is done up generally by a psychologist with additional training, so that's generally in trauma and disability and family dynamics, and it is a document that explains why things are necessary and how things are to be done. So this video I'm going to focus on restriction of the environment. So that might be in a cell house, having someone restricted to their bedroom to be able to cool down. But there has to be limits of time placed on that. It might be locking doors and having gates, so if someone runs away on support workers quite regularly. It might also be, say, in a therapeutic facility, there used to be things called sensory rooms, which were actually sensory deprivation rooms. So they generally had 4 blank walls, carpet, maybe if you were lucky, a window, and a yoga mat. You could be left there for hours until you'd calm down. And that is really not helpful to someone. So you can see why they are so controversial. But restricting someone's environment, it might be necessary for their own mental health or safety at times, or generally for the safety of staff or other residents as well. So generally, a support worker works within the framework of, especially working with someone who doesn't have access to a day centre or a large social group, is the HALT framework. So HALT stands for hunger, anger, loneliness, tiredness. So basically hunger, if they're hungry, you feed them. If they're angry, you work it out and why they're angry. And this often is called acting out, and often people go straight to the restrictive practice without working out that behaviour is a form of communication and that anger is actually a secondary emotion. And that's a really interesting thing for people to work out. The second one is loneliness. So provide some companionship with them. You don't have to be talking all the time. It might be getting them set up on a Discord. It might be a Reddit thread. It might be getting them into day centre, social group, guides, scouts, volunteering. There's a multitude of options. If they're well enough to do so, paid work. All options for getting them out into the community. And then tiredness. If it's appropriate, encourage them to sleep as well. So we see that one is often used more than restrictive practices. So that's something that we need to be aware of. And we also see that restricting environment might also be restricting them to access to outside, but it's actually been therapeutically proven that outside and green space with well designed for disabilities is actually quite beneficial. And this is just scraping the very top of what is a restrictive practice and restricting environment as well. And generally, the one thing that they never restrict access to, because it is a hygiene, is access to the bathroom. If you were in risk of harm or harming others, you are likely to have supervision. And if you're in a CIL or an SDA house, you're likely to need help anyway. So that's the place where there is a bit of dignity given. And this also goes into another word that I haven't actually done a video on a while, and they have updated the definition of it, of dignity of care, of duty of care and dignity of risk. So duty of care is what support workers have to do to ensure your safety. So that might be, and when you're moving into a CIL house, there might be things that you're asked to purchase. So that would be a fridge and freezer temperature gauge. That would be a pill bob. That would be, if you're on any medications, getting those medications packed. And you then need to be able to understand why you're on that medication, how long you're on that medication, what reason it's being used for. Because if you don't understand the reason and you don't have a doctor's note, and it's something that alters your behaviour, your thinking, or your sleeping pattern, it is then considered to be a chemical restraint. And chemical restraints and physical restraints are the most controversial of all of the restrictive practices, because what can be used as a mobility aid to access the environment can also be used as a restriction. So if you've got a walking belt and it's on too long, a person can't get out of it, they might need help to move. So that can be a restriction. If a person isn't transferred from a wheelchair to a chair or a chair to a wheelchair back, that can be a restrictive practice. So you see why they are so controversial, because they are infringing on people's freedoms, freedom of choice as well. But we do know that certain people can't make decisions for themselves, and this is where, or they might have history of harming themselves, others, whether that be physically or emotionally. And we all see that as disability becomes more accepted and more mainstream, that there is a lot more research going into disability. Disability in Australia isn't seen as a moral problem, it's seen as neutral. In fact, the NDIS, they're trying to find ways to fund it properly as well. So restrictive practices are almost a leftover byproduct of institutionalization. However, they do need to be used in extreme cases, like, as I've said, if someone has a history of self-harm, harming others, harming property, stealing, and they might not be able to understand the consequences of their actions. And guys, if you're enjoying this series, can you please like, share, subscribe? That helps me to get seen by the algorithm. We're up to 41 watch hours, so I can't do this without you guys. And I will see you guys in the next video.